The first topic is going to be the Civil War. That's kind of what we were talking about last. And so today we'll just hit up some of the celebrities of the Civil War. I just kind of picked 5 from each side, 5 from the Union, the North, 5 from the South, the Confederacy. This is not going to be an exhaustive lesson, right? It's a lesson during cooking pizza, and we'll talk about maybe some of the top 10 people you should know from the Civil War. My opinion, this isn't based on textbook or what all the experts might tell you. But 10 people that I think you should know, and maybe some ideas about pizza you get along the way. All right, so here's a look at, you got some bacon, you got some red onions, you got some air fried potatoes, some garlic butter, and some ranch. And then right now I am about to add the cheese. Let's see here. Okay, so as I'm adding the cheese here, first person to talk about, and we'll go Union, got to start with Abraham Lincoln. So 16th president of the United States, pretty big wig here. You could say the Civil War started with Lincoln, kind of ends with Lincoln. So we need to know, right, was kind of against the expansion of slavery. The South thought, homeboy was going to get rid of slaves. So they decided to leave, to secede, start the Confederate States of America, and Lincoln doesn't believe in secession, so he wants to try to preserve the Union. Lincoln's strengths, leadership. Amazing leader. He kept the Union together. He was able to keep, some important border states like Kentucky and West Virginia and Maryland, states that actually had slavery, but stayed loyal to the Union. Lincoln, he wasn't a military mastermind by any means, but throughout the war, he actually kind of continues to put people in charge, like a Grant, Ulysses S. Grant, puts people in charge that make the right decisions down the stretch to win the war for the Union. Lincoln got no Emancipation Proclamation, right? Frees the slaves in all states currently rebelling against the United States. So those states that actually stayed loyal to the Union that had slaves, they got to keep their slaves. Let's see, what else? And that's kind of a wartime measure that helps him win the war from a military perspective, because it kind of incites rebellion in the Confederacy. And then, a lot of these African Americans, start joining the Union military. 54th Massachusetts Regiment. If you've seen the movie Glory, it's a great kind of depiction of that. The income tax. So Lincoln is the first president to issue an income tax, and that's to help pay for all these war efforts. Cheese complete, so we'll get that sucker in the oven here pretty soon. Let's see, Lincoln. Well, should you know, he kind of does a little bit of a chess match at the beginning of the war. There's a fort in South Carolina. It's called Fort Sumter. It was about to be taken over by the Confederates, and the chess match is basically, should Lincoln defend it, fight back, be aggressive to defend this fort, or should he kind of let the Confederacy take it, right? Lincoln's decision was he basically doesn't want to fire the first shots, right? So if he fires the first shots of the war, if he kills Americans first, then he thinks a lot of the rest of the nation will kind of look at him as the bad guy, right? And states who are kind of thinking, should I go to the South? Should I go to the North? He wants those states like Kentucky, right, to stay loyal. And so he allows the fort to be attacked. I think that attack goes on for like 34, 36 hours. It's bombarded, and Lincoln allows that to happen, essentially, so he will not look like the bad guy, right? And so he can retain some of these important states. Lincoln, he makes a lot of tough calls, a lot of tough decisions. There's the suspension of things like habeas corpus. He kind of shuts down some telegraph lines to where people can't really communicate as easily. He kind of prohibits some of the free speech, some of the talking bad against the government kind of stuff, because he didn't want to allow this mindset across the North that the war wasn't worth fighting, right? So he kind of had it's a civil war, right? You got to get drastic at times. But Lincoln's leadership, amazing during the Civil War. The North had almost every single advantage you could possibly want. And so he should, his side should have won, but, had the Union maybe had a lesser man in charge, the Confederacy might have won. Okay, so full disclosure, burnt the first pizza a little bit, the barbecue chicken one. Yeah, I got talking about Lincoln a little too much, so we'll have to cut him short from here on out. Next, we're going to go to kind of the top dog at the end of the war. That's going to be General Ulysses S. Grant. He is from Galena, Illinois. Grant will be the 18th president, much better general than he is president. I think most historians have him kind of as one of the more unsuccessful presidents. Grant is kind of a wild man. He's kind of a wild card. He's not exactly your top student from West Point. He enjoys alcohol. He's just kind of unpredictable. And for that reason, he's kind of sent out west to start the war. And that's not where the glory battles were being fought, away from the capital. So he's in Tennessee. Let's see, victories for Henry, Fort Donelson, big battle there at Shiloh, in which he actually had kind of a letdown to start, in which he didn't really have his camp protected like it should be, and the Confederates kind of overrun it. But at the end of the day, he's kind of able to get the troops, to push back the Confederates, and gets a hard-earned victory there. Let's see, he is, like I said, by the end of the war, Grant is going to be, I think it's, I don't know, maybe by like 1864, he's going to be promoted to kind of the lead commander of the Union. As he does this, he kind of pursues this philosophy of unconditional surrender, in which basically you surrender on his terms, or he's going to keep killing you, right? He's going to keep attacking your lines. So that kind of allows the war to end a little quicker, because he's willing to be a little less peaceful than the generals before him. He will receive General Robert E. Lee's surrender at Appomattox Courthouse. And Appomattox Courthouse, that's essentially where the war ends. There is a couple more months, few more months that pass by. Once Lee surrendered, he just surrenders his own Army of Virginia. But essentially, once that happens, Grant becomes the hero of the war, and he will be elected president of the United States. Somebody that Grant had as his right-hand man was William T. Sherman. Sherman is famous for his quote-unquote march to the sea, in which basically he marches through a lot of the South, through Georgia, to the coast, and he basically destroys everything in his path, right? So he has this concept of total war, in which anything at all that your enemy can use to their advantage, you destroy that, right? So he is going to destroy cotton fields. He's going to destroy, livestock. He'll take whatever cows he can, whatever chickens he can for his army, and what he can't take with him, he kills. He burns so his enemy can't use it. Right, burns down villages, like I said, farms, and anything his enemy could use, he destroys that. Right, he marches through the South, just unleashing utter destruction. Right, and his theory was, if I can make the enemy hate the war, then they'll surrender. Right, so it's not just the battlefield, but if he can make everyone back home, right, writing letters to their husbands, to their dads, to their brothers, to their sons, whatever it might be, writing to all these Confederate soldiers, hey, you have to come home. Hey, the family's farm has been burned. Hey, we don't have any livestock. We're going to starve to death, whatever it might be. If he can make the South hate fighting the war, then they'll surrender, right? And so I think his promotion and his march to the sea probably does help end the war a little sooner than had he not been put there. Sherman, like I said, so he burns everything. He burns down Atlanta basically to the ground. If you've seen Gone with the Wind, that's kind of a pivotal part of Gone with the Wind. He gets to Savannah in Christmas towards the end of the war. 1864, I think, gets Savannah, Georgia, right there on the coast, and the story has it that he sends a telegram to President Lincoln. So basically, once he ripped through the South, he knew the war was getting close to being over, and so he sends Lincoln a telegram saying, hey, for your Christmas present, I give you Savannah, right? Which is basically him saying, I have achieved my goal. Moving on from there, you're going to have, you got George McClellan, and he's a celebrity more from not being very successful. He's one of the early commanders of the Union, put in charge to win the war. He doesn't really advance his army very often. He wins battles that he barely wins. or he wins battles that he might win by a lot, but instead of smashing the Confederacy, instead of pursuing them when they retreat, he's done. He stops, he gives interviews, he contacts papers, he gets pictures taken. He's not really, he's the opposite of Grant. He's the opposite of Sherman. He has political aspirations. In fact, he will run in 1864 against Lincoln for president of the United States. He runs as a Democrat, opposes Lincoln. Lincoln had fired him previously. Him and Lincoln did not get along very well. And in fact, McClellan, I think he gets out of Dodge, and I think he moves to Canada, maybe to Europe. But McClellan, I think it was McClellan that Lincoln put in the paper at some point, could you please let General McClellan know if he is not going to use his army, I would like to borrow it. Because again, he wasn't really in it to smash the enemy. He was kind of slow. He's very cautious. The last one is going to be George Meade. I think that is George B. Meade. I chose Meade because he's kind of the hero for the Union at Gettysburg. Meade, I think Fredericksburg is another big victory for him. Gettysburg is kind of the turning point in the Civil War. That is as far as the Confederacy had advanced to the north. Got a little guest appearance here. Hey, can you say hi? Dada, dada. But Meade is victorious at Gettysburg, and the Confederacy never really recovers from that. And because of that, yeah, babe, I'm talking to my students. We're talking about history. And because of their loss at Gettysburg, because of Meade's strategy in defending Gettysburg, he's able to drive the South back, and Lee never really recovers, and he's always kind of backpedaling from there on out. And Meade is able to kind of help turn the tide. And then, and we'll get into this later, but the last reason I kind of chose Meade was, little buddy can say hi. It was because he's gonna play a main role in Reconstruction, kind of making sure that the South stays under control. The South follows the rules they're supposed to be following after they lost the war. Nice. Here's the red onion, bacon, and potato garlic butter ranch. We're gonna go with a couple different kinds of cheese here, some mozzarella, some Colby Jack. Gonna be using red onion, sliced up. Got some bacon. Did some, just melted down some garlic, some butter. It's got lemon pepper in it, and it has Italian seasoning. And we've got some cilantro here we'll top with. And then we're about to throw into the air fryer. There's the air fryer right there. About to throw into the air fryer some potatoes that we cubed. And those have garlic powder, lemon pepper, Italian seasoning, and paprika. And they're just kind of coated with some oil. Do you want to do some rolling, babe?
How about I take one side and you take the other? Ready?
Good girl. Emmy, hey. Emmy, hey, can you say history?
History. I can see you sitting on the sander. I just thought I was making...
All right, so now time to talk about the Confederacy, the Confederate States of America. To be honest, I think the five guy, well, not Jefferson Davis, but I think the military personnel, I think, are actually kind of more interesting, more intriguing, maybe more historically exciting than the Union. But we'll start off with the president. That is Jefferson Davis. Jefferson Davis is kind of fairly moderate, and I think that's why he was chosen to be the first president of the Confederacy. Interesting note here, Jefferson Davis is actually elected to a 6-year term. So whereas, the United States obviously has 4-year terms for their president, Jefferson Davis was elected to a 6-year term, does not excel at military strategy whatsoever. In fact, that's kind of one of his weaknesses. I don't really see much of a way that the Confederacy could have been successful in winning this war, but his leadership didn't help out much at all. He is actually, willing to fire the first shots at Fort Sumter, and he attacks that fort for like 34 hours, and it kind of makes him look like the bad guy. And I think that's why, West Virginia, they kind of become a new state in the Civil War, but West Virginia and Maryland and parts of Missouri and Kentucky stay loyal to the Union. After the war is over, there is a $10,000 reward for Jefferson Davis. He is captured. He is thrown in jail for a few years. I don't think he's allowed visitors or anything like that. And after the war, he gets out of Dodge as well. And he I think there was a plan to like escape to Cuba, but I think once he was released from jail, he actually goes to Canada. Robert E. Lee is widely regarded as one of the greatest military minds in our nation's history. Top of his class at West Point, phenomenal military mind, veteran of the Mexican-American War. He is a Virginian. History tells us that when the war is about to break out, Lincoln actually chose Robert E. Lee as his top general, that he wanted Robert E. Lee to lead the Union troops because he knew he was the greatest. He was the smartest. And Lee did not believe in secession. Lee did not think that the South should leave the Union. But really, he was loyal to Virginia. So he had to turn down Lincoln because he couldn't imagine being in charge of the Union, fighting against his home state, right? Fighting against his cousins, fighting against his best friends, his family members. So he turns it down. He was, I think, quoted as saying something along, and I'll paraphrase, but something along the lines of, if he could sacrifice, if he could set off to the side, if he could prevent this war by getting rid of all 4 million slaves, then he would do that. He would do pretty much anything to save the Union except for fight against it. He just, loyalty was loyalty. Let's see here. So he is going to surrender in the war. His army of Virginia is basically the largest army the Confederacy has. And so when he surrenders to Grant at Appomattox, the Confederacy just really doesn't have much of a chance of winning the war after that. So basically his surrender ends the war. For him, his home is actually modern day Arlington National Cemetery. So kind of as a middle finger to General Lee, during the war, the Union soldiers start burying some of their dead bodies, some of their dead soldiers, in his front yard, in his backyard, on his property. And, obviously the point being there, symbology or not, the point being that, hey, if you win the war, if you lose the war, you're going to come home to a bunch of bodies of who you are responsible for killing buried in your front yard. So obviously the family moves, they don't reside there anymore. But yeah, so today when you go to Arlington National Cemetery in DC, that was Robert E. Lee's property. After the war, he never regains his citizenship. I think he is a president at a college, Washington College, probably in Virginia, but Washington College. And he's never given his citizenship ever again. I believe most of the rest of his life, he is president of that college. And today, I think it's kind of named after him. But great military mind. The war goes on as long as it does because he is in charge, because he knows his things. He knows his X's and O's. Kind of a big mistake at Antietam, in which a lot of his men die, and then a big mistake at Gettysburg, in which a lot of his men die. But the war goes on as long as it does because of Robert E. Lee. Okay, another cool guy in Civil War history is Stonewall Jackson. His name, I believe, is Thomas, but Stonewall Jackson, kind of a cool name. I think any football player would like to have this name. But basically, I think it's the first Battle of Bull Run, the Confederate soldiers are getting overrun. It looks like they're going to lose the war. The Union is attacking. They're kind of blowing up their lines, pushing through wherever they want to push through. And some onlooker from a hill nearby, or some onlooker down the line, notices that one specific part of the line wasn't being pushed back. And that when these Union soldiers ran into this line, basically it looked like they were running into a stone wall. And it came to be known that Thomas Jackson was commanding that part of the line. And so he gets this nickname, Stonewall Jackson. Stonewall Jackson is going to die in the war. Very sad story. He's actually shot on accident by his own soldiers. They mistook him for the Union. In fact, I think as he's approaching the camp, approaching his men, he even says, like, hey, it's Jackson. And these guys on watch thought it was a joke, thought it was a trick. Thought that the Union was trying to disguise themselves and fired shots. He's shot maybe a couple times, I know specifically in his left arm. And he is going to die of pneumonia and maybe some infections as a result of that. And so if you guys did that assignment the other day, you know how bad these Civil War hospitals were. But as news gets to Robert E. Lee that Stonewall Jackson is going to have his left arm amputated, Robert E. Lee has kind of a famous quote that General Jackson has now lost his left arm, but I have lost my right hand. Just kind of giving a shout out to Stonewall Jackson of how important he was to Robert E. Lee, how important he was to the success of the would-be success of the Confederacy, right? So he will die of pneumonia. Like I said, probably some infection as well, and that's going to hurt the South. He is another incredible mind from West Point. He's another very experienced military mind for the Confederacy, and very, very well respected by his men. And this is a mind, and this is leadership that the Confederacy just can't replace. Okay, so we got 2 left here. We're going to go with George Pickett. I chose Pickett because if you know anything about Gettysburg, you probably know about Pickett's charge. And Pickett is a Virginian. Pickett is one of Robert E. Lee's top dogs. And Pickett is on, I think it's July 3rd, right? 1863, I think it's July 3rd. Pickett is tasked with attacking the central lines of the Union at Gettysburg. And unfortunately for Pickett and his men, those lines are about a mile away. It's like 3/4 of a mile, and it's across open field, right? And I don't know if you can see behind my house, but boom, there's an open field, right? And Pickett has to attack across that, and marching with gear, right? 3/4 of a mile. I mean, you're talking minutes and minutes and minutes of being exposed. And his men are hit with cannon fire, rifle fire. Even when they try retreating, the Union cannons and rifles still mow them down, and it's a total disaster. It's said that, when he gets back with very few men, but when he gets back and he reports to Lee that obviously was unsuccessful, that Lee takes credit for it. It was my mistake. I should not have made you, march across an open field, but don't worry, the war is continuing. Get your men reorganized, and we have to plan. And it is said that Pickett said, I don't have any more men to organize. They're dead. We just lost them all. And at that point, the South doesn't recover, and they are basically playing defense and backpedaling the rest of the war. All right, last guy for the Confederacy is P.G.T. Beauregard. I think he is from Louisiana, New Orleans, thereabouts. Incredible military mind, very, very sharp, knows his X's and O's, great leader. The problem with PGT, at least for the Confederacy, is he doesn't always take orders very well, and especially from politicians. And so he rubs a lot of these politicians the wrong way, and he kind of gets demoted and transferred and stuff like that. But he is... he's just rough around the edges. He's kind of like Ulysses S. Grant and William T. Sherman. Kind of chose him. The Confederacy had a lot of great military minds. Chose P.G.T. Beauregard because had he not ruffled feathers with politicians, maybe the war goes on longer than it did had they used him, better. But also because he's actually going to be the homeboy in charge of attacking Fort Sumter. So when Jefferson Davis decides to take Fort Sumter in South Carolina, P.G.T. Beauregard is in charge of that 30-plus hour assault, right? In which they're basically not going to take no for an answer. And then the other reason I chose him is because he's actually kind of tasked, put in charge with stopping Sherman's march to the sea, that he is responsible for checking Sherman. He is responsible for stopping him from destroying the South, and he just can't do it, right? And again, a big reason why the Union won the war. All right, so here it is. All you Barstool Sports followers, one bite, you know the rule. Yeah. The bacon, red onion, potato pizza, it's good. It's good. So, what I have, oh, look at this. Here we go. What I have is pizza. Got a wife in there trying pizza. I've got Emmy, you just saw her eating pizza. I got a son knocking out cookies. What I don't have is editing skills. So I apologize that the video is not very well edited. Hopefully we'll get better. If there's any of my students out there with extra time on their hands over this COVID quarantine, and you want to edit my videos, let me know. If you have a better name for this other than Cooking Through History, then let me know, right? But we're prepping here for the Upchuck food truck, one video at a time, and we're gonna make it happen. See you guys.